Every Christmas, my husband disappeared for 3 hours. I followed him, and what I saw in his trunk made my blood run cold. I never imagined that night would change my life forever. Hello, dear ones. I'm Grandma Betty. I'm 76 years old, and today I'm sharing a story from my life that I've kept to myself for a long time. But before I begin, if you're enjoying this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any stories like this one. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing my stories reach people from all corners of America. It was 1969. I was 20 years old and had been married to August for 15 years. We met when I was only 15. Back then, marrying young was common, wasn't it? He was a handsome man, hard-working, respected in the community. He worked as a commercial representative for a large textile company, always well-dressed in his impeccable suits. I was proud of him. I truly was proud. We created a comfortable home in Springfield, in western Massachusetts. We didn't have children, something that always saddened me, but we were what many called a model couple. August earned well. I took care of the house. We were active in our church community, and we had many friends. Our Christmas parties were famous in the neighborhood. I put effort into everything: the stuffed turkey, the traditional desserts, the house decorations. My family and his would come celebrate with us. It was a special time, but something strange began to happen. It didn't happen all at once. There were small signs that I ignored at the time. You know how it is. When you love someone, you prefer not to see certain behaviors. It was Christmas 1966 when I first noticed. After dinner, when everyone was in the living room talking and laughing, August became restless, constantly checking his watch. Around 10 p.m., he pulled me aside and said he needed to visit an important client who could only meet him that night. "A client on Christmas night, August?" I asked incredulously. "Yes, darling. He's a very busy man, owns a large store. He can only see me tonight, and it's an important sale for us," he answered, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. I thought it was strange, but I didn't question further. August left and returned about 3 hours later, with a smile on his face and smelling of cologne that wasn't his. When I asked about the smell, he said the client had offered him Christmas liqueur and the perfume must be from the client's wife. I believed him, or rather, I forced myself to believe. When you're young and in love, you fool yourself, don't you? We prefer to believe a comfortable lie than face a painful truth. The next day, when I was organizing the gifts to distribute to the family, I noticed something strange. A blue silk scarf I had bought for my sister Cecilia wasn't where I had stored it. I searched the entire house, turned everything upside down, but the scarf had vanished. I mentioned it to August, who shrugged and said, "You must have forgotten to buy it, Betty, or maybe you gave it to a friend and don't remember." That left me confused. I was certain I had bought that scarf. I remembered perfectly the day, the store, even the saleswoman who helped me. But without proof, I accepted that perhaps my memory was playing tricks on me. Life went on. Months later, I hardly thought about it anymore. August continued to be the attentive husband he'd always been. He brought me small gifts, flowers for no special reason, took me out to dinner on Fridays. I felt loved, and that Christmas episode was behind me. Until Christmas 1967 arrived. Everything happened exactly the same way. The same wonderful dinner, the same family gathered, the same laughter. And again, around 10 p.m., August looked at his watch, became restless, and told me he needed to visit that important client. "Again, August, on Christmas night?" I questioned, now with a hint of suspicion in my voice. "It's the only time he can see me, darling. I promise not to be long." And he left, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne I had given him as a present that morning. When he returned 3 hours later, his cologne had been replaced by another, sweeter, clearly feminine one, and there was a small lipstick stain on the collar of his white shirt that he tried to hide by turning up his collar. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay looking at the ceiling with 1,000 thoughts spinning in my head. The next morning, when I organized the presents, I noticed that the pocket watch I had bought for my father had disappeared. It was an expensive watch, silver, with his initials engraved on the cover. I looked everywhere, but it simply wasn't anywhere in the house. When I confronted August, he again suggested that I must have imagined buying it or perhaps left it at the store. I even went to the jeweler's, but the salesman confirmed I had taken the watch with me. That's when I started hearing comments. First, it was my cousin Irene, who came to visit and, having coffee in the kitchen, casually asked, "That girl who works with August, what's her name?" "What girl?" I asked, genuinely confused. As far as I knew, August worked mainly with other male representatives like himself. That pretty young woman I saw him with at the Westfield Hotel restaurant last week. They were having lunch together, seemed quite close. My heart raced. August had never mentioned having lunch with a woman. When I confronted him, he said she was a client's daughter who was helping with her father's business and that the lunch was strictly professional. Again, I chose to believe. What else could I do? I had no proof, only suspicions and coincidences. And so we came to Christmas 1968. The same ritual repeated itself. The dinner, the family gathered, August looking at his watch, the excuse about the client, the hasty departure, the return 3 hours later smelling of women's perfume. This time, it was a cashmere scarf that disappeared. An expensive present I had bought for my mother, chosen with such care. When it disappeared, something inside me disappeared too. My trust in August. The neighborhood comments increased. Laura, my best friend since childhood, invited me for tea at her house and carefully told me she had seen August entering an upscale jewelry store downtown. She watched him buy an expensive gold bracelet that I never received. "Betty, I didn't want to tell you this, but you're my friend. If it were me, I'd want to know." The months that followed were the most difficult. I lived in constant suspicion. I began checking the pockets of August's suits, smelling his shirts, calling his office to confirm where he was. He noticed the change in my behavior and became more careful. There were no more lipstick stains. He showered as soon as he got home and always had a ready explanation for everything. And so, we arrived at Christmas 1969, the Christmas that would change everything. I had planned every detail of the dinner, as always. The house looked beautiful, decorated with the best we could buy. The turkey was perfect, the traditional desserts arranged on silver trays. I wore my best dress, had my hair done at the salon, and wore the French perfume August had given me for my birthday. Weeks before, I had found a small velvet box in the inside pocket of August's jacket. When I opened it, I saw a delicate pearl necklace, beautiful, certainly very expensive. My heart filled with hope. Maybe I had been wrong all this time. Maybe this was my Christmas present. "What's this?" I asked, showing the open box. August seemed surprised, then nervous, but recovered quickly. "It was supposed to be a Christmas surprise, Betty. Now you've ruined the surprise." I closed the box, returned it to his pocket, and apologized. For the first time in a long time, I felt a twinge of guilt for suspecting him. Maybe I was really imagining things, letting jealousy consume me without reason. The night of the dinner arrived. My brother Paul, 5 years younger than me, came with his wife. It was the first time he participated in our dinner, as he lived in Boston and rarely visited. We had a wonderful meal. Everyone complimented my cooking. We laughed, we sang. For a few hours, I allowed myself to forget all suspicions. Until, like clockwork, at 10 p.m., August started getting restless. He looked at his watch, then at me, and with a rehearsed smile, said he needed to leave to visit that important client, the same client from the last 3 Christmases. Something inside me broke at that moment. It was as if a dam had burst. All the doubts, all the sleepless nights, all the missing presents, all the comments, everything surfaced at once. But I kept calm. I smiled and said, "Of course, dear, don't be long." As soon as he left, I ran to Paul and, with tears in my eyes, told him everything. The mysterious disappearances on Christmas, the women's perfume, the neighbors' comments, my suspicions. Paul had always been my protector since childhood. He listened in silence and then said, "Let's follow him. I have my car here. If he's doing something wrong, you have the right to know. And so we prepared to discover the truth that would change my life forever. Back then, the streets weren't as well lit as they are today. I remember observing houses decorated with Christmas lights passing by the car window as we moved away from our familiar neighborhood. August drove confidently, clearly knowing the way well. We began entering a part of town I rarely frequented, a more affluent neighborhood with large houses and well-maintained gardens. "This is the third time he's turned right," I whispered to Paul, as if August could hear me, even though he was in the car ahead. "He seems to know exactly where he's going." After about 20 minutes, August finally stopped in front of an elegant house. It was a beautiful 2-story building with a large porch and an impeccable garden. Even at night, you could tell it was an expensive residence, the kind of place where doctors, lawyers, and successful businessmen lived. Colorful Christmas lights decorated the windows, and a decorated pine tree could be seen through the large living room window. Paul parked the car at a safe distance, behind a large tree that gave us some cover, and immediately turned off the headlights. "What do we do now?" he asked, looking at me with concern. "We wait," I replied, with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. August got out of the car, adjusted his suit, and looked around as if checking if he was being observed. My heart skipped a beat when he went to the back of the vehicle and opened the trunk. From our angle, we could perfectly see what he was doing. First, August removed several bags of gifts wrapped in silver paper I had never seen before. Then he took what appeared to be a box of wine or champagne, and then my eyes widened when I saw him take out 3 packages that I immediately recognized. The first was rectangular, wrapped in floral paper, exactly like the silk scarf I had bought for my sister Cecilia at Christmas 1966 that mysteriously disappeared. The second was a small square box with a gold bow, identical to the packaging of the watch I bought for my father in 1967. And the third, a softer package, wrapped in green paper, my mother's cashmere scarf from 1968. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was as if someone had punched me in the stomach. There they were, in my husband's hands, the presents I had bought with such care for my family, and that had mysteriously disappeared. He had stolen them from our own house to give to whom? But the worst was yet to come. After balancing all those packages in his arms, August returned to the trunk and took out something that made me gasp: the small blue velvet box I had found in his jacket weeks before. The box that supposedly contained the pearl necklace that would be my Christmas present. "That bastard," muttered Paul beside me, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I couldn't respond. A mixture of anger, sadness, and humiliation overcame me. It was as if the ground had opened beneath my feet. All that time, he was not only cheating on me, he was stealing the presents I bought for my own family and taking them to someone else. August closed the trunk and, with his arms full of presents, walked to the house door. He rang the doorbell with his elbow and waited. When the door opened, a golden light spilled onto the walkway. We couldn't see who had received him, but the smile on August's face said it all. He entered, and the door closed behind him. "Let's go," said Paul, starting the car. "Have we seen enough?" "No," I replied firmly, surprising myself. "I need to see who's in that house. I need to know who he's taking the presents he stole from me to." Paul tried to argue, but he recognized the determination in my voice. We parked the car a bit further ahead, where it would be less visible, and walked back to the house. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it would be heard throughout the neighborhood. The cold December air cut my face, but I barely felt it, such was my determination. We cautiously approached the house. There was a large window on the side, partially covered by light curtains. Through it, we could see part of the living room. The vision I had through that window on that Christmas night of 1969 will forever be etched in my memory. The room was beautifully decorated, with fine furniture and artwork on the walls. A large Christmas tree occupied one corner, surrounded by presents. In the center of the room, sitting on an elegant sofa, was a young, beautiful woman, perhaps 10 years younger than me. Her black hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and she wore a red dress that highlighted her slender figure. Next to her, sitting on the carpet, was a girl of approximately 7 years, with the same black hair and a face that, my heart skipped a beat, frighteningly resembled August's. My husband distributed the gifts he had brought. First, he handed over the bags with the silver wrappings, which the girl began to open with childish enthusiasm. Then he gave the 3 packages that I recognized as the missing presents from my family. The woman opened the silk scarf and wrapped it around her neck, smiling. The cashmere scarf was carefully placed on a side table, and then came the moment that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. August knelt before the woman, took the small blue velvet box from his pocket, and opened it. Even from a distance, I could see the gleam of the pearls under the lamplight. The woman covered her mouth with her hands, visibly moved, and August placed the necklace around her neck. Then they kissed, a long, passionate kiss, while the little girl clapped her hands with joy. I felt my legs weaken. Paul held me by the arm, preventing me from falling. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of dedication, of love, of care for our home. All a lie. August not only had a mistress, he had a complete other family. At that moment, something inside me changed. The pain gave way to a cold, calculated anger. I straightened my shoulders, wiped away a solitary tear that escaped down my face, and walked determinedly to the front door of the house. Paul tried to stop me, but I was beyond any caution. I rang the doorbell. The seconds that followed seemed like an eternity. Finally, the door opened, and August appeared. When he saw me standing there, his face transformed into a mask of absolute terror. The color left his cheeks, and he opened and closed his mouth several times, unable to make a sound. "Betty," he finally managed to stammer. "What are you doing here?" "I came to meet your other family, August," I replied with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "I came to see where the presents that disappear from our house every Christmas go." The woman in the red dress appeared behind him, confused. When her eyes met mine, she frowned, not understanding who I was or what I was doing there. "August, who is this lady?" she asked, and her voice was soft, polite. "Regina, August seemed suffocated, unable to complete the sentence. "I'm Betty," I answered for him, looking directly into her eyes. August's wife. The shock on her face was genuine and devastating. Her eyes widened, and she brought her hand to her neck, involuntarily touching the pearl necklace she had just received. "Wife?" she repeated as if she didn't understand the meaning of the word. "But that can't be true. August told me he was a widower." The girl appeared at the door too, curious about the commotion. She looked at me with big brown eyes, August's eyes, and then at her father, confused. "Daddy, who is this lady?" she asked innocently. That word, Daddy, was like a knife through my chest. It wasn't enough to have the betrayal, the lies, the stolen presents. August had a daughter, a child who carried his blood, who called him Dad, who probably received all the love he never showed for the children we never had. "She's a dear client," August tried to explain, his voice trembling. "Go back inside, please." "Client," I repeated with a bitter laugh. 15 years of marriage, and that's how you introduce me, August, as a client. Regina looked from August to me, understanding slowly taking over her face. She took a step back, as if wanting to distance herself from this terrible reality she had just discovered. "You're married?" she asked August, her voice barely above a whisper. "All this time, the years we've been together, you had a wife?" 8 years. The girl looked about 7. That meant Regina was already pregnant when August started his relationship with her. While I waited for him at home every night, he was building another family on the other side of town. "Reg, I can explain," August began, but she interrupted him. "Explain? Explain what, August? That you're a liar, a cheater?" She yanked the necklace from her neck with a sharp movement, almost breaking the delicate chain. "This is also stolen, like all the other gifts you've given me." The little girl began to cry, frightened by the argument. Regina pulled her inside protectively. "I want you out of my house now," she said to August, her voice trembling with anger and humiliation. "Take your things and leave. I never want to look at you again." "Regina, please," August begged, trying to enter, but she blocked the passage. "Get out!" she shouted, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked at me, and I saw a mixture of anger and compassion in her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I really didn't know." The door closed forcefully, leaving August outside, standing on the porch like a statue. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw his true face. The face of a weak, lying, despicable man. "Betty," he began, taking a step in my direction. "Don't you dare come near me," I said, backing away. Paul was beside me now, a solid and comforting presence. "I never want to look at your face again, August. It's over." I turned and began walking toward Paul's car. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't make a scene. The pain was too great for tears. It was as if a piece of me had died there, on that porch decorated with Christmas lights. "Betty, wait, let me explain." August shouted behind me, his tone desperate. "I love you both." I didn't want to hurt anyone. I stopped and turned slowly. I looked into the eyes of the man with whom I had shared 15 years of my life and said calmly, "It's over, August. I never want to look at your face again. For me, you died tonight." And I continued walking with my head held high as I left behind not only August, but the naive and trusting woman I had been until that night. In the car, Paul asked if I wanted to go to his house in Boston. I shook my head. "Take me home," I said simply. "I have something to do." My dear ones who are watching me, that Christmas night changed everything for me. I discovered not only that my husband was cheating on me, but that he was leading a complete double life with another house, another woman, and even a daughter. And worse, that he stole the presents I bought, with so much love for my family, to give to his other family. When Paul left me at home that Christmas night, it was already past midnight. The house was still decorated for the party, the remains of dinner on the table, half-empty glasses, candles nearly burnt out. August's family and mine had left after our sudden departure, probably confused about what was happening. The silence was oppressive. I entered and locked the door behind me. For the first time in 15 years of marriage, I turned the key in the lock of our house, a simple gesture that symbolized the end of an era. My mind was strangely calm, as if a storm had passed, and now I could see everything with crystal clarity. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break objects or tear up photographs as they do in movies. Instead, I went straight to the bathroom, filled the tub with hot water, and allowed myself a long bath. I washed not only my body, but my soul. I washed away 15 years of lies, of illusions, of a life that I now realized had never been real. As the water cooled around me, I made my decision. August had stolen 15 years of my life. He had stolen the possibility of having children with a man who truly loved me. He had stolen my trust, my dignity, and I would not allow him to steal anything more. I got out of the tub, dried myself, and put on a clean nightgown. I took a blanket and a pillow and settled on the living room couch. I would never sleep in the bed I shared with August again. But surprisingly, I slept deeply, without dreams, as if my body knew I needed strength for what was to come next. In the morning, the sound of a key turning in the lock woke me up. August was returning home, probably thinking I would be hysterical, crying, begging for explanations. Little did he know that the Betty he knew no longer existed. I calmly got up, fixed my hair, and waited standing in the middle of the living room. When he opened the door and saw me there, he paused for a moment, visibly surprised by my calm. "Betty, he began, but I raised my hand, interrupting him. "I don't want to hear explanations, excuses, or lies. I want you to take only your personal items and leave this house now." He seemed shocked by my firm tone, my unwavering posture. This was not the confrontation he had rehearsed in his mind. "You can't throw me out. This house is mine too." He tried to argue, entering and closing the door behind him. This house was bought with the money from the inheritance I received from my grandfather, I responded calmly. It's in my name. You have 1 hour to get your clothes and personal belongings, not a minute more. August turned red with anger. I saw the transformation in his face from guilty and remorseful to furious and threatening. He took a step in my direction, fists clenched. You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. A husband who has another family. A husband who steals presents from his own wife. A husband who has been lying for years. My voice remained calm but firm. You have 1 hour, August, or I'll call the police and tell them about the falsified documents I found in your office. That made him stop. His eyes widened slightly, and I realized I had hit a nerve. I was bluffing. I didn't know about any falsified documents, but his reaction told me everything I needed to know. What are you talking about? He asked, trying to seem confused, but his voice betrayed him. You have 1 hour, I repeated, turning my back and going to the kitchen. I started preparing coffee as if it were a normal day, as if my world hadn't just collapsed. I heard him go up the stairs heavily, cursing under his breath. For the next hour, I listened to his movements upstairs, closet doors being opened and closed, drawers being rummaged through. I remained in the kitchen sipping my coffee, planning my next step. When he came down, he carried 2 large suitcases and seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot, hair disheveled. He stopped at the kitchen door, looking at me as if expecting me to change my mind, to beg him to stay, to accept his apologies. Instead, I finished my coffee. I washed the cup and placed it on the drainer. Then I turned to him and said only, "The keys, please." He blinked, confused. What? The house keys. You don't live here anymore. With slow and reluctant movements, he took the keychain from his pocket and removed the keys to our house. No, my house. He placed them on the kitchen table without saying a word. Goodbye, August, I said simply. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but after a moment closed it again. He picked up his suitcases and left through the front door. I waited to hear the sound of the car leaving before moving. As soon as silence returned, I went to his office on the lower floor, a room he always kept locked, claiming it contained confidential work documents. The key was kept behind a painting in the hallway. I always knew where it was, but had never dared to enter there without permission. What a foolish and trusting wife I had been. The office was organized and elegant, with a solid wood desk, bookshelves, and a small safe built into the wall. I knew the safe's combination. It was the date of our wedding, an ironic detail that now seemed almost cruel to me. Inside the safe I found exactly what I expected: documents, many documents, sales contracts, receipts, cash books, bank statements. I sat at the desk and began examining each paper methodically. What I discovered in the following hours left me stunned. August was not just a liar and betrayer, he was a criminal. He falsified sales notes, inflating values to pocket the difference. He kept parallel accounting, hiding a significant part of his income from the company and consequently from the tax authorities. There were even documents with my forged signature, committing me to loans and investments that I was completely unaware of. My first instinct was to run to the police, report everything, see him behind bars. But then a more calculated thought took shape in my mind. Prison would be too quick, too easy. August deserved a more lasting lesson, one that would hit him where it hurt most, in his pocket and reputation. Carefully, I separated the documents into 3 piles. The first contained evidence of fraud against the company where he worked: diverted commissions, phantom sales, non-existent clients. The second showed tax evasion, years of false declarations, undeclared income, invented expenses. The third, perhaps the most serious, contained the forgeries of my signature, implicating me in shady business. I used the typewriter he kept in the office to write 3 different letters. The first addressed to the owner of the company where August worked, an upstanding man who blindly trusted my husband. The second to the IRS, detailing years of tax evasion and fraud. The third I kept with me as a guarantee. During the following days, I acted as if nothing had happened. I went to the hairdresser, visited my mother, shopped at the market. In public, when asked about August, I simply said he was traveling for work. Meanwhile, I discreetly opened a bank account exclusively in my name and transferred all the savings we had in our joint account. August tried to call me several times. At first, I ignored all the calls. When I finally answered, a week later, his voice sounded desperate. "Betty, we need to talk," he pleaded. "I know I made a mistake, but we can resolve this." "There's nothing to resolve, August," I replied coldly. "Our marriage is over." "But what about the house, our savings, my documents in the office?" Ah, so that's what really worried him. Not the loss of our relationship, but material possessions, and more importantly, the incriminating documents. "Your documents are safe," I answered, "for now." "What do you mean, for now?" His voice rose an octave, fear clearly showing. "I mean that if you try to contest the divorce, or if you try to take anything from this house, or if you bother me in any way, these documents will go directly to the police. Understood?" The silence on the other end of the line was revealing. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, calculating. The real August, whom I had never really known. "Are you blackmailing me, Betty? I didn't think you were capable of such a thing. You stole presents I bought for my family, maintained a double life for years, forged my signature, implicating me in illegal business. And you have the audacity to be surprised that I'm protecting myself?" My voice remained calm, but each word carried the weight of my indignation. "It's not blackmail, August. It's justice." I hung up the phone and for the first time since Christmas night allowed myself a small smile. The game had turned. The following week, I quit my part-time job at the store, took the carefully prepared envelopes, and traveled to Boston. Instead of delivering them personally, which could raise suspicions, I mailed the first two from 2 different post offices in distant neighborhoods. The third envelope, my guarantee, I left stored in a bank safe that I rented specifically for this purpose. I returned to Springfield and waited. The storm didn't take long to form. 2 weeks later, I received a call from August. His voice was unrecognizable, a mixture of fury and panic. "What did you do?" he screamed on the phone. "I was fired. The IRS is investigating my declarations from the last 10 years. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied calmly, although my heart was beating fast. "Don't lie to me. Only you knew about those documents. Only you could have done this. Just as only you knew about the presents I bought for my family, and yet they disappeared," I retorted. "Life comes full circle, doesn't it, August?" He cursed, threatened, begged. None of it affected me. When he finally calmed down, he said in a dangerously low voice, "You'll regret this, Betty. I'll take everything from you. The house, the savings, everything." "Try," I replied simply. "The third envelope goes directly to the police if you make any move against me." The silence that followed was eloquent. He knew he was cornered. "What do you want?" he finally asked, defeated. "I want an uncontested divorce. I want to keep the house and our savings, and I want you out of my life forever. And in exchange, the third envelope remains where it is, kept and sealed." There was a long pause before he answered. "All right, you win." The divorce was quick and discreet. August didn't contest any terms, allowing me to keep the house and our savings. In a few months, I was officially single again, at 35, starting a new life. As for August, I heard from acquaintances that he left Springfield soon after the divorce, professionally disgraced and financially ruined. The company sued him for the fraud, and the IRS imposed heavy fines for tax evasion. Apparently he tried to seek shelter with Regina, but she, having discovered the extent of his lies, also rejected him. I never knew where he went after that, nor did I care to find out. For me, August was dead from that Christmas night when I saw the contents of that trunk. My dear ones, revenge may seem sweet at the moment, but I learned that its true value lies in the liberation it provides. It wasn't August's suffering that healed me, but rather taking back control of my own life. Using against him the same weapons he used against me, deception and manipulation, I achieved my independence and a new beginning. But life holds surprises for all of us, good and bad. And what happened in the years that followed, how I rebuilt my life and found a new meaning for my existence, is something I'll tell in the next part of this story. If you're enjoying my account, please leave your like, share it with someone who would appreciate hearing this message of hope, and tell me in the comments which part of my story resonated with you the most. Until the next story, my dear ones, remember always our past shapes us, but it doesn't need to define us. Part 2. Rebuilding my life. After the divorce, I found myself completely alone for the first time in my adult life. At 35 years old, in 1970, being a divorced woman in a small town like Springfield wasn't easy. Judgmental looks followed me wherever I went, with whispers behind cupped hands when I passed the ladies at church. The indiscreet questions about what had happened to poor August. Few people knew the complete truth. For most, I was the villain of the story, the difficult wife who had kicked her husband out of the house and ruined his reputation. August, always charismatic, had cultivated an impeccable image in the community. I, on the other hand, had always been more reserved, less sociable. It's not hard to imagine which side people took. My only allies were my mother, who never doubted my word, and my friend Laura, who had warned me about August years before. My brother Paul, who knew the whole truth, lived too far away to offer daily support. The rest of my family and friends were divided, many preferring to keep their distance from a scandal that could tarnish their own reputations by association. The first months were the most difficult. I woke up every morning in a house that seemed too big, too silent. The side of the bed where August slept remained untouched. I couldn't allow myself to occupy that space, as if it were the last vestige of a life that no longer existed. Meals prepared for just one person seemed a sad reminder of my solitude. Still, there was something liberating about being alone. I no longer had to answer to anyone. I no longer had to worry about elegant dinners for August's work colleagues. I no longer had to pretend we were the perfect couple. For the first time in 15 years, I could be just Betty, whoever she was. And that was my greatest challenge, rediscovering who I was. Throughout my marriage, I had defined myself as August's wife. My tastes, my opinions, my dreams. Everything had been molded to complement his life, to fit into the role he expected me to play. One day, about 3 months after the divorce, I was cleaning August's old office, the last room in the house that still held his presence. That's when I found, hidden behind some books on the shelf, an old notebook of mine. It was a diary I had kept before I met August, when I was only 14 years old. I sat on the dusty floor and began to read. The yellowed pages revealed a young woman full of dreams and ambitions. I wanted to study, travel, see the world. I wanted to be a teacher, inspire other young minds. I planned to have a large family, 5 or 6 children running around the house. There were poems, drawings, magazine clippings with places I dreamed of visiting. I cried reading those words written in still childish handwriting. Where had that dreamy girl gone? At what moment had I allowed her dreams to be replaced by someone else's? That night, I made a decision. It was time to rediscover my dreams and, more importantly, pursue them. But where to start? The opportunity came from an unexpected source. Laura, who worked at the only bookstore in town, told me that the owner, Mrs. Celeste, was looking for an assistant. Celeste was a 70-year-old widow who had run the bookstore alone since her husband's death 2 decades earlier. Now, her eyesight was failing, and she needed help. The next day, I went to the bookstore. It was a welcoming place with shelves that went from floor to ceiling, filled with books of all kinds. The smell of paper and ink permeated the air, mixed with the aroma of jasmine tea that Mrs. Celeste always kept in a teapot, on a small burner on the counter. "Laura told me about you," said Celeste, examining me over her thick-rimmed glasses. "She said you're organized, honest, and love to read." "I love books very much," I replied shyly, realizing at that moment how long it had been since I had read something purely for the pleasure of reading. "Well, that's the basic requirement for working here," Celeste smiled. "But I need someone who does more than just sell books. I need someone who understands that each volume on these shelves is a door to a different world, and that helping someone find the right book at the right time is almost a sacred act." Something in that phrase touched a deep chord within me. "I believe that," I said with more conviction than I had felt in a long time. I began working at the bookstore the next day. The first weeks were intense learning. I needed to familiarize myself with Celeste's peculiar cataloging system, learn the names of regular customers and their literary preferences, understand the workings of orders and deliveries. But beyond the practical tasks, there were the more subtle lessons that Celeste taught me. How to identify exactly the book that someone needed, even when the person couldn't articulate what they were looking for. How to create a welcoming space where people felt comfortable to explore, converse, discover. How to keep alive the love of literature in a small town where many saw books as merely a luxury. The bookstore quickly became my refuge. Among the silent shelves, away from the stares and whispers of the town, I found peace. In the quiet hours of the mid-afternoon, when few customers appeared, Celeste encouraged me to read. "Consider it part of your job," she would say. "You can't recommend well what you don't know." So, I rediscovered the pleasure of reading. I devoured novels, biographies, poetry, essays. Each book was a window to a world where I wasn't August's ex-wife, but just a curious mind, a soul in search of connection and meaning. Customers began to notice the change. Gradually, people came to the bookstore, not just to buy books, but to talk with me, ask for recommendations, share impressions of their readings. Women, especially, seemed to find in me a confidant. Perhaps my situation as a divorced woman, living independently, sparked their curiosity or secret admiration. It was one of these customers, a teacher named Helen, who once again changed the course of my life. Helen taught literature at the only high school in town, and often came to the bookstore to find materials for her classes. We became friends, and one day, approximately a year after I started working at the bookstore, she appeared with an unexpected proposal. "I'm organizing an adult literacy group," she explained, as part of a government program. "We need volunteers to teach classes 2 nights a week. I thought of you." My immediate reaction was refusal. "But I have no training for this. I haven't even finished my studies." Helen smiled. "You have something more important than diplomas. You have passion for books and for reading, and you have empathy. I've seen how you help people here, how you really listen to them." She added, "Besides, the program includes training for volunteers. You wouldn't be alone." Reluctantly, I agreed to try. The following week, I attended the first training session held in a classroom at the school after regular class hours. There were 6 volunteers, most teachers like Helen, all with more formal education than I had. I felt out of place, inadequate. But when the training began, something awakened within me. The teaching techniques, the educational materials, the discussions about how to connect with adult students, everything seemed to make profound sense, almost as if I were rediscovering knowledge I already had, but had forgotten. 2 weeks later, I taught my first class. My class consisted of 10 adults, men and women, between 30 and 65 years old. Most were farm workers or domestic workers who had never had the opportunity to study. They were there for different reasons. Some wanted to read the Bible without help. Others wished to write letters to distant relatives. Others still dreamed of better job opportunities. I was nervous. My hands trembled when I wrote my name on the blackboard. But then I looked at those faces. Faces marked by hard work and the sun, faces that showed determination and hope, and my nervousness disappeared. Those people trusted me to guide them on a transformative journey. I couldn't disappoint them. That first class was certainly awkward. I made mistakes, forgot parts of the plan, sometimes spoke too quickly. But at the end, when a woman of about 60 managed to write her own name for the first time, and looked at me with eyes filled with emotion, I knew I had found my path. Weeks turned into months. During the day, I worked at the bookstore with Mrs. Celeste. On Tuesday and Thursday nights, I taught my adult students to read and write. On weekends, I studied, prepared classes, read about teaching techniques. There wasn't much time left to think about August or lament the past. On one of these study weekends, in the spring of 1972, I went to Boston to visit my brother Paul and to find some books we couldn't get in Springfield. He suggested we visit the book fair, an annual event that brought together publishers and bookstores from all over the country. The fair was a dream for someone like me. Hundreds of stands full of books, authors giving talks and signing works, people of all types united by their love for reading. I walked among the stands like a child in a candy store, amazed by such abundance. It was at a small stand dedicated to educational books that I met him, or rather, he found me. I was examining a literacy manual when a deep voice asked, "Do you work with adult education?" I looked up and saw a middle-aged man, gray at the temples, kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He was simply dressed in a shirt with rolled-up sleeves and well-pressed pants. There was something in his posture that inspired immediate trust. "Yes," I replied. "I'm a volunteer in a literacy program in Springfield." He smiled, and that smile lit up his entire face. "Richard Kent," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm a professor at the School of Education here in Boston. I coordinate a similar project." We talked for almost an hour. Richard was a widower, had 2 adult children, and dedicated his life to improving education, especially for those who didn't have opportunities at the conventional age. He spoke passionately about his work, about how literacy could transform entire lives. At the end of our conversation, he asked if I would like to participate in a workshop he would be conducting the following week, specifically for volunteers in literacy programs. It would be in Boston for an entire Saturday. "I'd love to," I answered sincerely, "but I'm not sure if I can come to Boston just for that. The bookstore—" "I understand," he said, looking genuinely disappointed. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he added, "Actually, we're planning to expand the workshop to other cities. Maybe I could come to Springfield for a special session, if you can gather other interested volunteers, of course." The offer caught me by surprise. "You would travel to Springfield just for that?" "Yes," he smiled. "I believe the work you're doing is crucial. Any help I can offer." 2 weeks later, Richard came to Springfield. The workshop was held in a borrowed classroom at the school where Helen taught. Not only did volunteers from our program attend, but also teachers from the region and people simply interested in the topic. Richard was a born teacher. He spoke with clarity and enthusiasm, shared practical examples, answered questions with patience and respect. We all left that day inspired, with new ideas and renewed energy for our work. Before leaving, Richard invited me to dinner. I accepted, albeit with some hesitation. I hadn't gone out with any man since the divorce, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that, even if it was just a professional dinner. But the meeting was surprisingly comfortable. Richard was an excellent listener, genuinely interested in my journey, my challenges, my discoveries in the field of education. There was no pressure, no romantic insinuation, just 2 people connected by a common passion. When we said goodbye at the door of the small hotel where he was staying, Richard held my hands and said, "Betty, you have a gift for teaching. Have you considered formalizing your education, completing high school, maybe even entering university?" I laughed nervously. At my age, with my history, I think that opportunity has already passed me by. He shook his head seriously. "It's never too late for education, and your life experience would only enrich your studies. Think about it." That night, lying in my bed, I thought a lot about Richard's words. Could I really resume my studies? Could there be a new life for me beyond the boundaries of Springfield, beyond the limitations I had imposed on myself? In the weeks that followed, Richard and I kept in touch through letters. He sent me reading materials, answered my questions about teaching techniques, commented on the progress I reported with my students. It was a friendship based on mutual respect and shared interests. It was in one of these letters that Richard mentioned a new university program specifically for adults who wanted to complete their formal education. "It would be perfect for you," he wrote. "I'm certain you could get a scholarship, considering your volunteer work." The idea of going back to school, planted by Richard, grew within me every day. At night, after closing the bookstore or returning from literacy classes, I found myself dreaming of a different life. A life that included a university classroom, academic books, intellectual discussions, dreams that seemed impossible for a divorced woman of 37 in 1972. I shared my hesitations with Mrs. Celeste during a quiet afternoon at the bookstore. We were organizing a shipment of newly arrived books when I mentioned Richard's letters and his suggestion about resuming my studies. "And what's stopping you?" she asked, looking at me over her glasses with that penetrating expression that always made me feel as if she could read my soul. "Everything," I sighed. "My age, my lack of formal studies, money, this town." Celeste closed the book she was cataloging and rested her hands on the table, fixing her eyes on mine. "When my husband died, almost 25 years ago, everyone expected me to close the bookstore. A 45-year-old widow shouldn't run a business alone," they said. "I should sell everything and go live with my sister in Hartford. Do you know why I didn't do that?" I shook my head, curious. "Because I realized I had two choices: live the life others thought appropriate for me, or live the life I wanted for myself. I chose the second option and never regretted it for a day." She adjusted her glasses and smiled. "Now you're facing the same choice, Betty." Her words resonated deeply. That night, I wrote to Richard, accepting his offer to help me enter the adult education program. 2 weeks later, I received a voluminous package containing all the application forms, information about scholarships, and a handwritten note from Richard. "The first step is always the hardest. I'm here to help with whatever you need." The following months were a whirlwind. I prepared for the admission exams, studying in my free hours between work at the bookstore and literacy classes. Richard sent me study materials and occasionally came to Springfield for workshops, always finding time to guide me personally. Our friendship grew with each meeting, each letter. Richard was everything August had not been: attentive without being possessive, respectful of my opinions, genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. Yet, he maintained a respectful distance, never pushing for more than I was ready to offer. In December 1972, I received the letter that would once again change the course of my life. I had been accepted into the special program at Boston University with a partial scholarship that would cover half the expenses. Would it be enough? Celeste, always my confidant, didn't hesitate when I shared the news and my financial concern. "I have a proposal for you," she said, serving us tea in her fine porcelain cups, reserved for special occasions. "For years, I've been thinking of opening a branch of the bookstore in Boston, but I never found the right person to manage it. You could be that person, Betty. A small apartment above the shop would be part of your compensation, also solving your housing issue." I choked on the tea. "But Celeste, I can't leave you alone here. And my students in the literacy program?" "I can hire another assistant," she replied with simplicity. "As for your students, I'm sure Helen will find someone to replace you. Besides, think of how many more people you can help with a university education." And so, in February 1973, I left Springfield with my heart divided between the sadness of leaving and the excitement for what was to come. The house where I had lived with August was sold, and the money, added to what I had already saved, would provide good support during my studies. Boston was a completely different world from Springfield, larger, more bustling, full of possibilities. The new branch of Celeste's bookstore was in a university neighborhood, and the small apartment above the shop was simple but cozy. The walls were quickly covered with bookshelves, transforming the space into my own literary refuge. Richard was a constant presence during my adaptation to the new city and university life. He helped me navigate the campus, understand academic procedures, overcome my initial intimidation with professors and colleagues decades younger than me. "You have something they don't," he would remind me when I felt insecure. "Life experience. Don't underestimate its value." The first semesters were challenging. Dividing my time between studies and managing the bookstore required discipline and sacrifice. Many nights I spent awake, studying after closing the store, preparing papers, reading academic texts that sometimes seemed written in another language. But there was also an intoxicating joy in learning, in feeling my mind expanding with each new idea, each new concept. Gradually, I gained confidence in the classroom. I began to participate in discussions, to question, to contribute with my own perspectives. My experience with the literacy program in Springfield became the subject of my first important academic paper at the end of the second semester. Richard, who was a professor in a different department than mine, offered to review the text before submission. I invited him to dinner at my apartment one night in June 1973 to discuss the paper. I prepared homemade pasta with fresh tomato sauce, a recipe my mother had taught me, and opened a bottle of red wine. Richard arrived punctually at 7, bringing not only his notes on my work, but also a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite flowers, as he had noticed in one of our conversations. It was a simple gesture, but touching in its attention to detail. The dinner went pleasantly, our conversation flowing easily from academic topics to personal stories, philosophy, literature. Richard had the gift of making me feel intelligent, interesting, worthy of being heard, a sensation I rarely experienced during my marriage with August. After the meal, we sat side by side on the small sofa to review my work. Richard made insightful observations, suggested improvements, but mainly praised the quality of what I had written. "There's a sensitivity here, Betty, a deep understanding of the literacy process that many academics with decades of study can't capture." Something in the tone of his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made my heart race. Our eyes met for a moment too long to be casual, and then I don't know who moved first. We were kissing. A hesitant kiss at first, almost shy, that gradually deepened with an urgency that surprised me. When we finally separated, we were both breathless. Richard took my hands in his eyes serious. "Betty, I need you to know that my feelings for you go far beyond friendship or professional admiration. I understand if you're not ready, if the past still weighs too heavily, I can wait." Those words triggered a whirlwind of emotions inside me. Fear, hope, excitement, hesitation, all mixed in a knot I couldn't easily untie. "Richard," I stammered, "I don't know if I can trust again. I don't know if I'm capable of opening myself to someone after everything I've been through." He nodded understandingly. "What August did left deep scars. I understand. I just asked for a chance to show that not all men are like him. We can go slow, at your pace." That night, Richard left with a soft kiss on my forehead and the promise that nothing would change between us unless I wanted it to. I spent hours awake, reflecting on my feelings, on the risk of trusting again, on the possibility of a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, Richard kept his word. He continued to be a friend and mentor, never pushing, never demanding more than I was ready to give. We continued to see each other regularly to discuss my studies, to stroll through Boston Common on Sundays, to visit art exhibitions or attend lectures on campus. It was during one of these Sunday afternoons, walking among the trees in the park, that I realized I was falling in love with him. It wasn't a dramatic revelation, just a quiet certainty that settled in my heart. Richard was good, honest, respectful. He was a man who believed in me, who valued my mind as much as any other part of me. On an impulse, I stopped walking and took his hand. Richard looked at me, surprised. "I'm ready," I said simply. I didn't need to explain more. He understood. Our relationship blossomed slowly, with the caution of two people who knew the pain of loss. Richard never tried to replace or erase my past. Instead, he helped me integrate it into the new life we were building together. In 1975, when I was in my third year of college, Richard proposed to me. It was a simple proposal, without grand romantic gestures, just a sincere question asked during a dinner at his apartment. "Betty, would you do me the honor of sharing the rest of your life with me?" I hesitated only for a moment, not out of doubt, but due to the magnitude of the decision. "Yes," I finally answered, "but with one condition." Richard raised his eyebrows, curious. "I want to finish my studies first. I want to walk into our marriage as a woman complete in herself, not as someone who needs a man to define her." He smiled, his eyes shining with admiration. "That's why I love you, Betty, your strength, your determination. I'll wait as long as necessary." We married in January 1977, 1 month after my graduation. It was a simple ceremony in the garden of the house we had bought together on the outskirts of Boston. Mrs. Celeste came from Springfield, as did my mother, my brother Paul and his family. Helen and some of my former students from the literacy program also made the trip. Richard's 2 adult children were present, having accepted me into their lives with a generosity that still moves me today. In the years that followed, we built a life based on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine love. Richard continued teaching at the university until his retirement in 1985. I divided my time between managing the Celeste's bookstores network, which eventually expanded to 3 locations in Boston, and my own work in adult education. In 1980, at 45 years old, I completed my master's degree in education with a dissertation on innovative methods of literacy in rural communities. It was Richard who organized the surprise party after my defense, gathering friends, colleagues, and even some of the adults I had taught to read in Springfield years before. We never had biological children. That possibility had already passed for me when we married. But Richard's children, Edward and Marianne, became like my own, especially after the birth of their children, my heart's grandchildren. And over the years, dozens of students, both the university students and the adults from the literacy programs I continued to coordinate, filled our house and our life with youth and purpose. As for August, for many years I knew nothing of him. It was only in 1990, almost 20 years after our divorce, that I received an unexpected letter. It was signed by Regina, the woman with whom August maintained his parallel relationship during our marriage. In the letter, she explained that August had recently died after years battling alcoholism. Before dying, he had asked her to find me to deliver something. Intrigued and apprehensive, I agreed to meet her at a cafe in downtown Boston. Regina had aged with dignity. Her hair was now gray, but she still maintained that serene beauty I had noticed on that fateful Christmas night. She brought with her a small box and her daughter Julia, now a young woman in her 20s with the same eyes as August. "He kept these all these years," said Regina, pushing the box toward me. "He said it was the only honest thing left from his marriage to you." Inside the box, I found the blue silk scarf I had bought for my sister, the watch that was for my father, and the cashmere scarf for my mother. The presents August had stolen over so many Christmases. Along with them, an envelope with my name written in the familiar handwriting. I didn't open the letter immediately. I waited until I was alone at home, sitting on the porch that overlooked our garden. Richard was traveling for a conference, and I felt that this moment belonged only to my past. The letter was brief, just a few lines from a man obviously ill, possibly already near the end. "Betty, there aren't enough apologies for what I did to you. I ruined the best part of your life with my lies. I've spent decades paying the price, but I know it will never be enough. These presents should have gone to your family. At least this I can try to fix, even if too late. I hope you found the happiness you deserve. August." I didn't cry reading those words. Time had transformed my pain into a kind of distant peace. August was no longer the villain in my story. He was just a broken man who made terrible choices and lived with the consequences. When Richard returned from his trip, I told him about the meeting with Regina and August's letter. He listened in silence, holding my hands in his. "How do you feel?" he finally asked. I reflected for a moment before answering. "Grateful," I finally said. Not for any late redemption from August, but because without that Christmas night, without all that pain, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have found my true path. I wouldn't have found you. Richard smiled and pulled me into his arms. I think that's what they call turning ashes into beauty. And so has been my life, my dear ones. Richard left us 5 years ago, after 40 wonderful years together. I miss him every day, but I continue living a full life, surrounded by our combined families, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and the many books we shared over the years. That Christmas night of 1969 could have destroyed me. For a time, I thought it had. But I learned that, even in the most painful experiences, there are seeds of transformation if we choose to cultivate them. Today, at 76 years old, I look back and see not a life divided by a betrayal, but a complete journey with its deep valleys and glorious peaks. That young Betty, who followed her husband to an unknown house and saw her heart shattered by the contents of a trunk, could never have imagined the rich and meaningful life that awaited her. And that's what I want to leave with you today. No matter how dark the night seems, dawn always comes. No matter how painful the fall, there is always the possibility of rising stronger, wiser, more authentic. Sometimes the end of one dream is just the beginning of another, greater and truer one. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey of memories. If my story has touched your heart in any way, please leave your like, share it with someone who might need to hear this message of hope, and tell me in the comments which part of my story resonated with you the most. Until the next story, my dear ones, remember always, our past shapes us, but it doesn't need to define us.